this video, we'll be talking about solving linear equations in one variable. You all are very familiar with linear equations in one variable. You have a single variable, and it's linear because the largest exponent is 1. Now, there are three types of linear equations. One is called an identity. That is, the left-hand side of the equation turns out to be identical to the right-hand side of the equation. If you solve an identity, if you notice here, we would get 3x plus 3 equals 3x plus 3. If I subtract the 3x, I get no x's, and I end up getting 3 equals 3. Or if I subtract the 3's, I get 0 equals 0. That's a true statement. It's not very useful, but it's a true statement, so those are called identities. On the other hand, we have conditional equations. That is, x is equal to a certain amount, or 2x is equal to 4, on the condition that x is equal to a certain amount. In this case, x has to equal 2. 2x equals 4 on the condition that x equals 2. A third type of equation is called a contradiction. It's similar to an identity in that our variables subtract away, but what we're left with is not true, like 3 equals 3 or 0 equals 0. What we're left with is something that's false. If we tried to solve this equation here, we would start off by subtracting x, but then we would end up with 0 equals 1, which is clearly not true, and that is why it's called a contradiction. So in some of these problems that you're going to be working on, you're going to identify whether you have an identity, a conditional, or a contradiction. In other equations, you're just going to do some solving. So in this question right here, you're going to distribute the -2, combine your like terms, and solve for x. What you end up with is 0 equals 0, which would be an identity. Now, when you have an identity, the actual solution is all real numbers. What this means is that I can choose any value I want for x, and whenever I put it into all the spots in my equation here, I'll get something on the left-hand side of the equation that will equal the right-hand side of the equation. And x can take on whatever value I want it to. For example, b, I'm going to solve this just like I normally would. And this would be called a conditional equation because 5x minus 4 will equal 11 on the condition that x equals 3. That's the only time 5x minus 4 will equal 11. Notice that they have the solution set in little curly braces. That's not necessary, but that's fairly typical. In example C, we have another linear equation. We're going to distribute the 3 and solve for x. And this time, what we get is something that doesn't make sense. We did not make a mistake in our math, but we ended up with -3 equals 7, which is clearly false. So our answer, our solution, is actually the empty set, or we could write no solution. But it's also called a contradiction.